Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Spilling the Tea on GovCon. I'm Teresa Moon, Director of Market Strategy for Parabolis. We are the preeminent partnership for government contractors, providing holistic support that includes a line of credit to fund your growth. The purpose of this podcast is to assist small businesses with success in the federal marketplace by introducing them to industry experts and resources that they may not otherwise know about. Today, my guest is Austin Boyd, CEO of Synovix, specializing in unique technical, engineering, and organizational performance solutions to tough problems. Mr. Boyd brings more than 47 years of corporate, federal, and private experience as a business leader, engineer, aviator, speaker, and community advocate. And we're proud to share his experience and expertise with our listeners. Welcome to the show, Austin.
Thank you, Teresa. It's good to be here.
Well, I know that people will definitely be interested in more than just the introduction that I gave. So if you wouldn't mind, take a few minutes and don't be bashful to formally introduce yourself. I'd love for you to go back as far as you're willing to, professional, military, all of those things. If you're willing to share personal, that's wonderful as well. But share some details with our audience about who you are, and then feel free to also share the work that your company does as well.
I'll do that. Well, since you asked about personal, I'll go back all the way.
Great.
12 years old, feeding some rabbits, had this sudden and amazing sense that I was called to do something to make a difference. And I felt it tied back to astronaut. But I'd grown up in an environment where everyone said, that's a dumb idea, that'll never work. So it took a long time until I graduated from college that I revealed that I wanted to be an astronaut, led me to the Navy to be a pilot. And a lot of folks said a phys ed major from Rice University will never become an astronaut. So I struggled and got into graduate school to get a graduate degree in spacecraft engineering. So from PE major to astronaut would still be a long shot, but not so bad now. I ultimately made it to the 1994 selection process. Was one of the last 6, and they picked one. So at least I felt like I'd given it a good run.
Right.
As a Navy guy and as a astronaut aspirant and as a spacecraft engineer, I did a lot of work in satellite communications and became an inventor in the Navy while I was doing my regular Navy job. And then moved on after the Navy, 25 years, retired, came to Huntsville, Alabama, which is Rocket City, USA. Got a job in business just doing business in satellite communications, and ended up becoming the business development lead. Grew a company from 40 million to $1 billion.
Wow.
And then that led to 2 turnarounds, and I finally decided to start a company to help people grow their own business. And I've been doing that for 10 years as White Space Innovations. And we've won $6.5 billion for our clients, 500 bids, 64% win rate.
Wow.
And we are a happy and thrilled Parabolis client.
Well, I appreciate that. And we are very, very happy to be able to support you. That is an amazing background, some of which I already knew, some of which I didn't, but extraordinary, especially the part about wanting to be an astronaut. I had no idea. That is really neat. And obviously it's, close to my heart, being born and raised here in Orlando. One of the things that makes it neat to have been born and raised here is that you can just look outside any given day and see, when I was a kid, space shuttle going off, and now, rockets are launched pretty frequently throughout the course of a month. And so that's super cool. I didn't know that. And I think that's awesome. And you guys are doing great work, and you're succeeding on that endeavor of not only building your own business, but helping other people do the things that you've been able to do internally with your company. And so that's why we wanted to have you on, because I think so often it's one thing to be able to share the successes that you have and be able to talk about what that journey looked like. But I think there's another side to it. And it's kind of what makes a person tick to be able to achieve things like that, to be able to go from a PE major to, potentially being an astronaut.
Yeah.
You got to have a lot of ambition right there. And so there's a lot to be learned from you, probably more personally than professionally, I think, to be able to get to the different levels that you've achieved. And so there's some things that we chatted about, briefly in the discussions building up to this conversation. And you even reference it on one of your websites as well. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about what it means to pursue the job left undone. I thought that was a wonderful way of phrasing it, and I'd love for you to expand on that.
I was post my second turnaround, and I'd left that turnaround with a desire to go off and do something in what I call my third career. Age 60, starting a business, some people would say is kind of crazy. And I was brainstorming with my wife about what to name the company. And I said, well, the Harvard Business Review says that the white space in the market is that place where there's a job left undone. And I said, from my perspective, white space, and I didn't get any further. And she stopped me and said, that's it, white space innovations. And so,
That's great.
moving forward, the job left undone for me has always been when folks said something was impossible, that will never work. I tried it before and it didn't work, or nobody ever thought of that.
Mhm.
I found in my inventing and in the programs I've been able to run and in the problems I've been able to solve for many years, if I run toward those four, it's impossible, it doesn't work, I never thought of it or that it would never work. Those tend to be the areas where there's solutions.
Mhm.
And so I'd run to the job left undone. We have a company that we've built around specifically looking for jobs left undone and might be in a client who is trying to improve profitability. What have you not tried? And generally, when I walk in and I advise a client, they say, well, I've tried that before, or that's impossible. It would never work. And then I unpack the question of why wouldn't it work? Or why was it impossible? Or why is it impossible? Or why have you never thought of that? And by the end of the meeting, invariably, they look at me and they say, well, what do I need you for? I've got an idea. We'll just do this. And so all I'm doing is really facilitating people, understanding that there are solutions to jobs that are left undone.
Mhm.
But a lot of other folks are looking to us for advice on how can I grow my market? And I say, go find that place where there's something that's not being done. There
Right.
was a great book a long time ago called Blue Ocean Strategies where they said, don't deck it out in the near waters to the beach where all the red blood in the water from all the sharks fighting each other. Get out in the open ocean and find the blue ocean. Do something that somebody else is not doing. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean you have to invent light speed travel or some unusual thing. It might just be that there's an intersectional innovation that nobody's thought about putting together. I wish
Mhm.
I'd been the fella who figured out how to mix chocolate and peanut butter and create a Reese's Pieces. So that's an intersectional innovation. Well, there are Reese's Pieces innovations of chocolate and peanut butter in all kinds of business.
Yeah.
So, in order to figure out where the job left undone is, though, there's three things you got to really, or four things you got to focus on, Teresa. First of all, you have to listen more than you talk. Open up your ears and let people describe what they're looking for. Because if you're so busy selling your solution, then really you're searching for a requirement. Instead, keep your ears open and listen for the requirement, figure out where's the job that's left undone. But before you get going too far, always ask yourself, why am I doing this? Many people don't start with why. Simon Sinek wrote a great book called Start with Why. And what he says is instead of starting with what I want to do and figuring out how to do it, and then ending up one day asking, why the heck am I doing this? Instead, start with why. Start with the end in mind. Why do I want to go off in a different direction? And if I'm going to go off in a direction, how will I do it? And then what will that look like? If you start at the center of that circle with why, you'll always be happy, and that helps you to find that job left undone. It also requires you to wade into unfamiliar territory. You've got to be willing to jump in the deep end. A lot of small businesses just chase those things for which they have set aside authority. I call it white collar welfare. And what you have to do is you have to be willing to get outside your skin and go jump into the full and open world in the government
Mhm. Mhm.
environment. And a lot of people aren't willing to do that. And then last of all, the big issue with regards to solving the job left undone is you never, never, ever give up.
Well, that's a perfect segue. And because I had on the agenda today. I love everything that you said. So before we move into it, but I want to talk about that never giving up aspect of, the philosophy that you've probably lived by for most of your life, given the fact of just the little bit that I know about you from your description of your life in the beginning of this program. But, what spoke to me a lot is the way of how uncommon it is that people speak more than they listen and how they don't truly understand what the reason why is for what they're doing. I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek. I listen to a lot of his books. I'm one of those people that when I exercise, I listen to books that are uplifting, and he's one of my go-tos a lot. And that's actually a book, Start with Why, that I've read and listened to of his, and so I can relate to it. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that are listening that can relate as well. And I think also the concept of going after the full and open instead of always going after the set aside. If you're going after those set asides as a small business, you're just one of many. If you go to the full and open as a small business and you've got experience in this that people can learn from you on, you're separating yourself from the big dogs who They may have past experience in whatever the opportunity is to a certain extent, but their ability to provide innovation and to be able to pivot when things change is a lot more difficult for them than it is for a smaller business. And so to have the courage to jump into that is as relevant as it is taking your PE degree and going to be an astronaut. So I love it. And you're fast becoming one of my favorite people now with all of the things that you're saying. But I think you're already showing me that, and who I am learning that you are is that you truly live by a philosophy of never giving up. And so if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about what kind of role that has played in your life.
Yeah. Well, we're products of our upbringing. I'm 71 years old and I'm still a 5-year-old stuck in a 71-year-old body. But at least that's what my grandchildren say. So since we're products of our growing up, first of all, when I was a kid, I always had an idea about something that would work better. I could make work new. It would be newer. It would be a great idea. And I'd heard all the time, that's a dumb idea. That'll never work. That's a dumb idea. It never work. So you can either become depressed and despondent and go hide, or you can say, well, I'll show you. And what that made me a bullheaded, stubborn fellow. But I recognized that if I would stick by my guns when I said something was possible, then it really was. So you have to believe in yourself, first of all. But then you have to learn how to adapt and overcome, because you'll be in environments where people don't want you to succeed or where you're going up against some tough challenges. And you just have to learn that didn't work. So I'm going to find a way around it. Growing up in the military for 25 years before I got in business taught me that there's always a way around. Now, we joke that as Navy pilots, we joke that Air Force pilots fly by the book and Navy pilots have no book. So another way of saying that is that the Navy pilots tend to ask forgiveness, not permission.
Mm-hmm.
When you're an ask forgiveness, not permission kind of guy, you adapt and overcome. You find the challenge, you figure a way around it. Is it illegal, or is it legal, ethical, and moral? Yes, then go do it, even though it doesn't say you can do it. But you have to adapt and overcome. And you have, in the looking for different paths, it's sort of like Robert Frost said, he reads in one of his poems, a road diverged in a narrow wood and I took the road less traveled by. That's me. Okay. I've always taken the road less traveled by. Or another boss of mine said, when I said, boss, I'm looking for a job, I'm not very good at being in the box. He says, Austin, you've never been in the box. You've always been out of the box. So you have to adopt a mentality of out of the box thinking, not that you're always trying to go against the flow, but you just have to be willing to look at things that other people ignore, because usually the solution to your problem is sitting right in front of you. Yeah, it's interesting. The quote for never give up comes from Winston Churchill, who said in a speech to his childhood school, his boyhood school, he said, never, 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 ever give in to the overwhelming might of the enemy, except in matters of honor and good sense. So never give up doesn't mean you have to be stubborn to a fault.
Right.
If there's an honor issue or if there's a good sense issue, then don't keep beating your head against the wall, because you're just going to get bloody. There are some ingredients in never giving up. I have a sign in the front of the business when you walk in, it says never give up. So everybody knows that's my go by. But first of all, you have to recognize there's a bright side in every challenge. Don't approach a challenge as oh, dang, another challenge is in my way. No, let's look at the bright side. Look at the things I'm going to learn from this. My wife has asked me many times, would you please stop praying for wisdom? Because God allows you to get into challenges that develop your wisdom. Please also stop praying for patience, because then we get put in these challenges that cause us to develop patience. Well, the bright side is every time I hit a challenge, I say, I get to learn something from this. Not gone yet. Another one is, like I said before, start with the end in mind. Never giving up means you have to know where you're trying to get to.
Right.
You don't just keep beating your head against the wall, not knowing what's on the other side of the wall, or at least having a hope. A third thing I found in never giving up is always put people first. I found in every problem I solved a lot of them. If you solve the people problem first, the material problem second, and the money problem third, that's the right priority. Because if you don't have people, you can't get past problems. If you have the right materials for those people to use, then you can enable the folks you found. And you can always find money if it's the right thing to do. Solve the people problem first. And most people, because it's hard to find people, go after the money first, they go after the material second, and then they go looking for the people last, and they don't succeed. Two last things I'd say is, remember Gale Sayers' philosophy. He said, I am third. This came back from the early 70s, and he said, God is first, my friends and family are second, I'm third. And you'll find if in never giving up, if you keep other people, the focus is your priority, and you put yourself third, you'll zip past the rest of the folks because most of them get caught up in themselves.
Hmm.
It's difficult to give up when you're putting other people first, but if you're putting yourself first, it's oftentimes you founder on the rocks. And the last thing
Hmm.
to say is treat other people the way you want to be treated. That will help you get through the challenge. And if you recognize that helping other people will get you where you need to go, sometimes never giving up means that I'm not going to give up on other people because I know they won't give up on me. So,
I agree with everything that you said. I think, there's wisdom in some of the simple things. People have heard a lot of what you've said, but not everyone puts it into practice like
yes,
I'm sure that you do.
integrated. That's
You
right. Integrated.
You don't have to overcomplicate things, right? But actually putting it into practice is what's important. And I imagine if we talk to people who work for you and with you, that they'd say all of those things are true about you. And and if that's the role that what you were raised in provided to you, then I'd say that your parents are very proud to know that's how you're doing things. The way that I was raised is very important in things that I do even to this day as well. And so I think that's even more so what we do down the line, right? Not only with our own families, but with the people who get put into our lives, whether it's for a short period or for a long period. We owe it to that journey to provide those positive things. And I think it's really wonderful. We don't hear people talking about things in the positive manner that you have very much. I think all too often we get caught up in, the doomsday, the what's wrong with the world around us. And it's very refreshing to hear you're looking for, how you can be a part of the solution instead of part of the problem.
Yeah.
So very refreshing. So thank you. And it's not that it's so different from other people. Of course, we've had, uplifting people come on the show before, but not in every single aspect of it. So I'm loving this conversation, especially I'm a literature major. So you referencing, Robert Frost and of course I've studied Winston Churchill's speeches as well. As a matter of fact, my oldest daughter had to do a famous speech analyzation in her English class this year. And she was like, I don't know what to pick. And I picked that speech for her to use.
Oh,
And she's like,
good.
you're gonna have to go through this with me. And I
Oh,
did. So it's funny. It's funny how things get intertwined and
oh,
that, yeah.
what's your favorite kind of literature?
I loved, believe it or not, British literature, but diverse. So I got really, and it was mostly because of influence from professors that I had. So I had a professor that was into medieval literature. So it was a little bit of Europe period, but a lot of it was coming out of England. But then I also liked the Victorian moving into the modern era of English literature too. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love American literature. I studied a lot of it, especially on the American philosophy side of things. But from what I liked to read for myself portion of it, I really dug into
Well,
British literature from
uh,
several different levels. So,
I'll mail you some books. I've published 6 novels too, so
oh wow, I would love that. I
yeah,
would
I'll send you
absolutely love
something to
that.
read.
I welcome it. So thank you. And I know this isn't a great segue into it, but it's something else that I wanted you to chat with us about too. Is when you were sharing with me some ideas, we were talking about why it's important to measure what you do. And I think your perspective on it is super uplifting as well. And so I'd love you to talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, so you get what you measure. If you're in a business and you're measuring everybody's travel costs, you'll spend a lot of money traveling. If you measure profitability and you focus on profitability, you'll get profitability. If you measure revenue and not profitability, you may grow, but not profitably. So it's interesting that folks don't realize that you steer where you stare. Is when you're driving down the freeway, got to be careful. You don't look at that guy on the sideline, because you might end up running into him. And you steer where you stare in business too. So if you're not keeping score, you're really only practicing in
Mm-hmm.
business. So I say set key performance indicators, set measures of performance, identify what it is you want to accomplish, and then drive toward that. Most folks think that is too simple. It's not simple at all, because measuring your performance requires an accountability partner. You have to have somebody in your business who's holding you accountable. So my CFO holds me accountable. Hey, Austin, we got to cut costs. And there's another saying, the flip side of that is, well, you don't cut your way to growth. Okay,
Right.
so I'm growing and she's trying to control costs so we can have profit right down the middle. And everybody's gotten into a profit problem at some point in their life. And it's because they're not measuring where they need to go. So that's why I just say you get what you measure, and you need to know where you're going and why you're going there.
Mhm.
Because you might be setting up measures against something you don't want to accomplish. So you go back to what I said earlier. Start with why. Why are we doing this business? Then how do we intend to run our business? And then what do we intend to accomplish at the end? And maybe profitability is not what's most important. Maybe it is accomplishment of a particular challenge, or maybe it's the number of people I hire or the problem I solve, whatever it happens to be. But you've got to always have key performance measures getting to wherever you're headed. There's two things you got to worry about. If you are focused on metrics, it's very easy for you to keep setting the bar higher and higher. So we have some intellectual property we've built where we can measure a person's value structure. And in that, I can see whether a person is highly stressed or not, whether they're satisfied with their life. I mean, we've measured 100 CEOs so far, and invariably they're happy, but they're not satisfied with their performance because they keep raising the bar. Well, that's okay because that's how CEOs get to be CEOs. They keep driving and moving forward. But if you don't have the balance, if you're so far over one way that it's all about performance and they keep raising the bar, eventually you're going to run into the bar when you try to jump above 9 feet. Nobody's done that yet, right?
Right.
So then what happens is you become disappointed that you hit the bar. You've got to have balance. You cannot be so focused. You can't be so so stubborn that you won't give up, and you can't be so focused on measures that you don't have some balance in your life. So I set up the business and I established it. I said, I want to solve tough problems for customers and I want to achieve life work balance. If you can do both of those, you can really have a good time.
And that's important because I think, I was talking earlier with someone about, when I was younger, I was so worried about being perfect that I missed the lessons that I made through the progress, right? And, I think a lot of hardship teaches you how to shift your perspective on that, right? And so life experiences, the older you get, it is true that the experience gives you wisdom more than years do because you can live a lot of years and have no experiences or live a few and have lots of them. And I think it's how you turn those into a positive to educate yourself on what you learned from it to make better of it next. And a lot of it is being able to measure. If you don't know what the end goal is, it's not going to make it easy for you to measure anything against it. So it makes a lot
Start
of
with why.
sense. Absolutely. And I think I've got to imagine that working with you and for you, both as a client of yours or as an employee of yours, that a lot of all of these topics that we've referenced today are put into the way that you are running your business and both internally and externally. And I think a lot of business owners are looking to be able to provide that same level of, personal success within your profession because we all know it's very important to not just achieve things professionally, but if you're not growing as a human on the way as well. And
Then
and
you're
a lot of that
one-sided.
happens on the job. Yeah.
You're a very shallow person if you're all about your business and there's no family,
Mhm.
there's no outside. But then other people are one-sided. They're all outside, they're all personal, and they're not really about the business. And so you really do have to have a balance.
And it's hard for people to find that because we live in a society where, success is measured by, like you were talking about, profit and money in your bank account and things like that to a certain extent, instead of looking at it from the success that's gained by relationships and experiences in life, not just, racking up more that you can put towards the next job that you're going up against. And I imagine that those are things that you allow to be focused on in your workplace too, which is rare. I work for an employer who also values, personal growth and personal development even more so than professional development. Because if you really care about the human being that you are and that you're putting out into the world around you, you're more apt to do the next right thing. And so I'm sure that you've got some advice that you can share with regard to, not only the team that you already have, but building your team and advice that you can share with business leaders that are looking to incorporate some of the things that we've talked about today.
Well, I tell you, I'm glad you brought that up, Teresa, because that's near and dear to my heart, and the word heart will come up here a lot. I want you to think of a resume as a chart. It's a measure or a picture of a person's history, right? So in almost all jobs, in almost all teams, in almost all partnering between companies, We build the partnering, or we hire the person for the chart. We say, that person's got the resume I need. It's real easy to bring Dr. Einstein and Dr. Krakow into your business, and they're the world's experts at whatever you do, but you end up with a caustic workplace because there's something about them that just doesn't work. So what we found is, when I started the company, I said I'd been part of 3 caustic workplaces, and I didn't like it at all. I was very successful, but didn't like it. I said, I'm going to create a company where I have the right kind of culture. I'm going to hire for heart, not for chart. I'm going to hire the best athlete and teach her the sport. And I'm telling you, it works. That you do have to have the chart. I do need a resume that says I know how to be a bookkeeper. I know how to take care of contracts. But what I found is, in my work, if I can teach them that, my contracts manager was a proposal person, and I taught her contracts management. My human resource manager was once an executive assistant for 20 years, and we taught her how to be a human resource manager. All of my business development folks were all other things, and I taught them business development my way. So it's not always possible. You can't run an aircraft factory and not hire with some resumes,
Okay.
but you need the heart piece. So the first thing about building a team is you need to hire for heart. And how do you hire for heart? It's fairly simple. It turns out that you watch the values of the individuals that you're looking at bringing in. Your values drive your judgment. Your judgment drives your decision making. If you have good decision making, you'll have good behaviors, which will lead to good outcomes. So values drive outcomes, and the outcomes of a group of people is the culture of the organization. So if you want a strong culture, bring in people with strong values. If you want a poor culture, bring in people with poor values. And there are ways to measure it, and I could take you through that. I won't do that on this call because that would be advertising, but there are tools that you can use to measure people's values. But look at the values, not just the resume. The other thing is, I think advice on teams is, people try to do it all themselves. And I'm a big proponent that 10% of a win is better than 100% of a loss. So let's go partner together and go win a job. A lot of people say, well, if I can't be prime, I don't want to do it. I'm going into GovCon. I'm going to prime. Why not be a sub? You can have a good mix, a good diverse mix of primes and subs, and you can get all that subcontractor past performance, get your nose under the tent before you launch off to be a prime. So I'm glad to join a team if I can get into a new customer, get in some new past performance, and get 10% of a win. That's super. And I generally don't have to do all the lifting to get there.
Right.
Another one is, you got to jump in the deep end. You can't always be in a small business set aside. You got to go into the big stuff. And so what'll happen is, a lot of people don't realize it, that you can build teams that have small businesses and go after large business jobs, because the government really has to satisfy those small business numbers, and they can satisfy them if you win a full and open competition. What a great idea. The last 2 things I'll say about it, building teams and taking care of your people, is if you help other people to win, it'll all come back.
Mm-hmm.
We have a program we call freemiums. So you get something free that's a premium value. I don't charge you for it, but I know that one day it'll all come back. You and I'll do something together and it'll all pay off. So if we're less worried about the immediate benefit to me, and we think more about the benefit to another person, it'll all come back. So if you put other people first, it's amazing how that builds engagement, and it builds partnerships, and it builds values, and it builds teams, and it keeps people together. And last of all, I'll say, if you want a strong team, you have to have communication. You have to make sure that you trust.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be transparent, be willing to have hard conversations, which means you better put some Teflon on, because it's going to get tough sometimes. You need to charge off as a team in unity. You do those 5 things, every company, every team, every group of people will succeed.
That's amazing. And I think so many people need to hear this, because it's all too often that they think they've got their eyes on the prize, the focus is on the mission, and that everything else will fall into place. And if you don't build a team of good people around you that have a core set of values that are in alignment with not only yourself, but each other, there's no way for them to work together to work for you or work towards something. And so we strive for this in our environment as well. I know, funny enough, to your point of hiring someone with heart, or hiring that athlete that you can train to do something else, that's me in our environment. I mean, I have 2 degrees in literature, and I work for a finance company. 0 background in finance, 0 background in banking. Do have some experience in government contracting and business development. But Bruce said, I was always less concerned with your experience in the industry, because that part I can teach you, and more focused on the fact of the type of person that you are, because that'll tell me, are you going to be someone that can be here for a long time? Or are you someone that's just going to be moving through and on to the next endeavor? And, we're not interested in that type of thing. And he figured out, thankfully, I wear my heart on my sleeve. So you can figure out for me real quick the kind of
That's
person I
okay.
am.
Hey, it means that we're not guessing. We know where we stand, and that
Absolutely.
transparency is important.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to take it or leave it. You get what you paid for with me, for sure. But I think that's very important in professional life, right? We can't shy away from who we are as people, because that's part of the core reason why businesses succeed, is because it's that transparency there of who you are is important as well. And this was an absolutely fabulous conversation. Like I said, we don't typically talk about things in an uplifting way that we have today. And I'm so glad that you were able to have time to join us. And I know there's a million other things from a technical level or professional expertise that you have that we can bring you back again. But if for this to be the first showing on this show for you, this was, headed out of the park. I thank you so very much.
I'm honored to have had a chance to be here, and I just want to say thank you, and thanks to Bruce and his team. Your company has done for me what I sought. I looked for 7 months to find a company like yours that recognized that only a signed contract counts. And it's amazing how many people out there don't get it, and we are just thrilled to be part of the Parabolas team.
Well,
She didn't
I
ask me to
appreciate
say
you
that,
saying
folks,
that.
but it's
Nope. I sure didn't. I appreciate it. And it has everything to do with the leadership in our company that trickles down. I mean, we truly put the people that we serve first. And Bruce is a testament to that in the life that he's led. And he demands that from everyone who works for us. And those of us who have been there a long time, we are in lockstep with that with him. So I appreciate you saying that very much. He deserves all the credit for that, for sure. So, but
thank
thank
you.
you again. Definitely appreciate having you on. And thank all of you for joining us today. As always, we pride ourselves on sharing the most insightful and exciting people and information to help you better navigate your GovCon journey. If you like what you heard today, you can see all of our past podcasts, which are archived on our YouTube channel by the same name. Stay tuned for all of our future guests in the coming months as we help you grow to great heights in the year ahead. I'm Teresa Moon, and this is Spilling the Tea on GovCon. Have a great day, my friends.
Bye-bye.